You are perched on the couch in your living room, doing nothing in particular. It was a quiet, it was quintessential summer afternoon. The weather was warm and the mood was lazy. So far, it had shaped up to be a pleasant day, if somewhat uneventful. No plans, no obligations, beyond a few usual chores. Liz had already fitted off, enjoyed herself. She left in the morning carrying a mysterious heavy bag. You hadn't bothered asking her what she was doing or what it needed a sack that clattered when it moved. She probably wouldn't be home till late. Your moms both had the day off and, like you, had been using their freedom to do nothing of import. The group of you finished cleaning up from your shared lunch, and Mom struck up a conversation.
So,
Well, what's next? Your mind was blank. You let the question hang, assuming Ma would be the one to reply, and glanced down at your phone out of habit. And right then the screen lit up, presenting you with a potential idea. A text notification had come in. Baxter's name displayed itself. He sent more messages after the first. You unblocked your phone to see it all. Hello and good afternoon. I'm intending to go sightseeing and would love it if you could join me. You're quite welcome to invite anyone else along. Your phone buzzed one more time with an additional note. Sincerely your friend, Baxter. You snorted at the screen. His typing style read more like a formal letter written with a quill pen than a text.
oh,
Did your friends text you? Ma smiled at you with an raised eyebrow. Gluing your face to a phone for so long must have been a big tip-off. Baxter is inviting me to go sightseeing. Wow, perfect timing. Yes, that's nice. Baxter Ward seems like a lovely young man.
not
He's a
bad.
step up or two from the Donalds, that's for sure. Neither Mom nor Ma had spent a lot of time around Baxter as far as you were aware. They'd met early in the summer, something unavoidable on the street, and had a few encounters since. I wonder where he's from. Ma didn't look to you for an answer, or her wife. She couldn't add the topic and assumed no one else in the room knew either. It was a wonderment for the universe alone. Mom still pressed her lips together in thought. No clue. But what I'm curious about is, what is he studying in college? He's on a break from school, isn't it?
Well,
Yes, he did mention he was on an off semester, but not more than that. Once the curiosity train left the station, there was no stopping it. The two traded questions back and forth, whispering with growing steam. There was someone on their street who was a stranger, a situation that hadn't occurred in a decade. What do you think his family is like? He's here all by himself. Again, none of you could enlighten the others. You had scarcely spent more time with Baxter than your parents, and you realized he hadn't been forthcoming with basic details. You found his mystery intriguing. It was exciting to know there was so much more to him to figure out. You refocused on your phone and the formal message that had yet to get a reply. You answered him in a similar fashion. Feeling inspired by his stiff texting tone, you couldn't resist having a little fun. Good tidings. Tidings? Sir Baxter, of course, I would be delighted to join you this fine day. I have finished my luncheon, so we'll venture forth to your dwellings. You hit send, aware that the message wasn't exactly a high society Victorian letter. It ended up more medieval fantasy scroll, but he'd probably get the joke. It didn't take long at all for Baxter to continue the conversation. Brave Brave Knight Stella, that is heartening. I shall see you post haste. My highest regards. Yeah, you got it. You smiled and turned to your moms. They had moved on to wondering about if Baxter had a part-time job. Probably not. Both of them were concluding. See you two later. I'm going to go see Baxter now. Have fun, kiddo. Yes, do that. Ma's grin was as sweet as honey being used in a trap. You could see the ulterior motive from a mile away.
Please?
And if you happen to find out anything about our new neighbor, maybe think of telling your poor moms when you get back. Lanny. Despite everything, Mom appeared amused at her wife's blatant attempt at the info digging. Well, I'd be interested to hear it too, if Baxter doesn't mind his mystification being cleared up. You smiled at your hilarious parents. Both Ma and Mom beamed back at you. It was one lucky break that your moms were so fun and lively, despite the occasional trouble their antics could bring. You wouldn't want them any other way. But it is a shame he hasn't actually moved into the neighborhood. I could invite him over and get to know him better myself. Sadly, that's not the case.
That's a shame.
He's a young man trying to enjoy his vacation. He should be out and about, not spending his limited time entertaining us old moms in our kitchen. Ma slumped her shoulders while expressing her limitations in this snooping matter, though she immediately perked back up. It's different if he's making a friend his own age. If you don't want to ask or it doesn't come up, of course that's fine. I'm only saying that if you do or it does, that I'd be curious to hear about it. I accept the mission. I won't let you down. Roger that.
Love you.
Thank you for indulging us, sweetie. I won't keep you any longer. Go have a wonderful day.
See you later.
Take care. Bye. You gathered up your phone, wallet, a water bottle, and a few other odds and ends you imagined might come in handy during an unspecified outing. You left the condo, your formerly normal but boring day rocketing off into an unknown direction. Baxter tended to have that kind of effect on things. Once outside, you crossed the street diagonally to reach Baxter's place. You found the doorbell and pressed it down. His doorbell was so much more reasonably placed. A second later, the man you wanted to see opened the door with a grin. From his quick response, You knew he had to have been standing by. You announced you'd be there, and he was ready for it.
Hello.
Hello, Stella. Thank you for coming. Hi, nice seeing you. At Baxter's obvious pleasure at your attention, you smiled in return. He stepped out of his condo and closed the door behind him to stand by you. I appreciate you agreeing so last minute. However, if you do have prior arrangements, this can be done another day. Sightseeing is my usual itinerary after all. I didn't have any plans, really. There was nothing to do.
Oh?
In that case, I'm glad today was the afternoon I asked. I've stopped in at least one scenic spot, tried a new restaurant, or browsed an unfamiliar shop nearly every day since I've been here so far. I've always had to go on my own, so this will be a special trip. Really? I'm impressed with how proactive you've been. Thank you. I've only had a few short visits to California in my life. Even then, I was underage and supervised by parents or guardians. He raised an eyebrow, and his voice took on a delighted tone. We saw each other on one of those rare occasions where I was in state dance instructors were controlling the schedule that time.
Is that fun?
This summer is my first chance to truly experience what the area has for myself. It's also not going to last forever, so I'd rather not waste my opportunities. His bold proclamation reminded you of how fleeting his presence really was in everyone's life. Exactly as he suddenly appeared, it wouldn't be too much longer until he vanished back to wherever he cut from. He was impossible to pin down. So, completely unrelated, but do personal questions bother you? He tilted his head, stumped by the apparent non-sequitur. You didn't clarify the originator of that topic, but you didn't need to call your moms out like that.
I can do that.
Not at all. I'm sorry if I give that impression. Was there something you wanted to ask me? He locked his door smoothly and tucked the key into his pocket. You are doing me quite a favor by accompanying me. He faced you again with the playfulness that was characteristic for him. I would be happy to tell you whatever you want to know about me.
My pleasure.
Please query me at your leisure. If there's anything you'd ever want to ask, I'm an open book in your hands. It could have stopped there, and you would have expected it to end on a formal bow, but the exceedingly official sounding offer was flipped into something coy and full of possibility. There are many things I would like to know about you. You can ask me whatever you want to.
Thank you.
That's a gracious offer. I'll take you up on it. He voiced no question yet, but you knew with his grin that it'd only be a matter of his patience. Instead of asking him personal information, you needed to use your question-asking authority for something else first. Where were you thinking of going sightseeing? Baxter placed a hand on his chin, considering. Ideally, the first stop would be your choice, Since you're so considerately joining me today, I may as well take advantage of your local expertise. After that, I can take you to the place that possibly even you haven't been to yet. I have a rental car, so it is no worry if you want to go somewhere that's too far to walk to. My choice will certainly require driving. I'm positive you've stepped on every inch of this town.
What do you think?
Does that sound agreeable? Letting you pick the first place and following it up with somewhere you hadn't been to before, despite living here for almost your whole life? What did you think you missed? Maybe it was the overconfidence of a tourist, or maybe it was something trickier, but he'd caught you off guard again. With Baxter's promise to tell you whatever you wanted to know, you hadn't prepared for him to still be so hard to read. You should have known he wouldn't suddenly get actually straightforward no matter how direct he claimed he would act. Works for me. With what you understood by Baxter, about Baxter, his part of the day would be fun for both of you, and he shouldn't have to plan anything. He was a friend, not your tour guide. Baxter flashed his shiny white teeth. Do you have anywhere in mind then? You pondered the request. If there was one place someone like Baxter should go see, what would it be? Inspiration struck. There was no place more iconic around. How about Shopping Street? The Shopping Street? I don't know what you mean. Given it was minutes away on foot, you worried if you might have offered old news, but it didn't come up on the map as anything other than a few of the permanent shops you had to be there to know. It's a row of local shops and stalls by the beach. It's right near our neighborhood. Really? His hanging attention encouraged you to continue. It's meant to be fun for visitors, not at all the typical grocery stores or clothing shops or things like that. Everyone should go there at least once while they're here. Baxter made a grand gesture of waving you onto the lead out.
Perfect.
That sounds absolutely perfect. Please show me the way. You obliged, and the two of you strolled down the inclined street. Neither of you were particularly rushing, and it still took less than 15 minutes to walk down the spot. You skipped over the cement curb onto a worn gray brick road and were there. Tantalizing smells and a mix of attention-grabbing music drifted from the open doors and outdoor stalls. The different songs blended into one new tune, a celebration for your senses. As normal for tourist season, the path bustled with a crowd of excited visitors. Aesthetically, Baxter stood out from a vast majority of colorful tourists, but his enthusiasm matched their faces of awe.
I love it.
This is wonderful. Confident you had suggested the correct choice, you let out a happy sigh. You continued wandering, but now you let Baxter direct the way. You merely followed along as he explored. He flitted to and from stalls like a monochrome butterfly in a flower garden, Terry had been more correct than she could have known when she made that comparison at the beginning of summer. While you had memories attached to each corner of the street, watching his first experience there was almost like seeing it with fresh eyes yourself. You scrutinized the available stalls out today and realized Baxter would have a huge gaping hole in the experience. There was no magician performing tricks anywhere. That bit of shopping street wondered what would go unknown to Baxter, even though he came all the way there. By chance, Baxter led you into an area where shows happened to in the past. Carts that appeared out of nowhere were inseparable from this place to you. Watching Baxter out of the corner of your eye, it struck you that you had never gotten close to a tourist before. Everyone you knew well also was familiar with Sunset Bird, or at least something in the area. But he was another one of temporary passerby. Hey, sometimes people do performances here. Oh, yeah, the most famous, to me anyway, was a magician called the Amazing Alexander. The Amazing Alexander? That sounds amazing. The sheer amount of thrill in Baxter made you happy. He had taste. Though his electric interest was honestly more than what you expected from hearing about a random street magician, but it was nice, so you continued. You explained about how when you were younger, you and a friend had thought about doing your own show too. Derek and you had been enthusiastic, but never could figure out what to actually perform. It never ended up happening. Baxter listened with amusement as you expanded the story. You were surprised that you could recall it as well as you did all these years later. It returned to your mind in waves. And it was nice that Baxter was enjoying himself without seeing the show himself. Coming here, it was more than just showing a small part of your world you lived in. You had shown him parts of yourself. Now felt appropriate to use your privilege to asking him a question about himself. What are you studying in college? The pragmatic choice. I like it. I'm studying for a business administration and management degree. The expectation is that I will manage and or administrate at some company in the future. He tilted his head, aware of the silly way he put it. Nothing too specific, I'm afraid. That sounds cool though. You think so? I'd have to say I agree. It might not surprise you to know that I can be a touch particular. I know the importance of coherence with individuals acting in a well-coordinated fashion. And I like things to function well for systems to operate smoothly.
Honestly.
I confess, you could call me controlling at times, not with people, but with processes. Especially when it comes to enacting plans, I'd much rather act under my own steam than follow someone else's lead. I'm only flexible with the personal, not the business, aspects of life. He spread his palms matter-of-factly. But that's enough about my aspirations. You know my story, so what about you, Stella? I'm curious to know what the world has in store for you further down the line. I just graduated high school.
Really?
Oh, really? My congratulations. It's an achievement to be proud of. If it's not too much to ask, where do you see for yourself next? College? Straight into a career, perhaps? You told them about your future plans. It's okay. You'd only spoken about your future plans with a few people before, but you felt like Baxter was someone you could be open with. At your reply, Baxter moved in slightly, his eyes sparkling. Since you'd responded positively, he had no qualms about letting his curiosity show. My story's a little different from yours. I was thinking about going straight into working full-time. Baxter attentively waited for you to finish and then nodded encouragingly. I think it's wonderful that you have something you're aspiring to already. I wish you the best of luck. It's an exciting thing, taking the first step on your journey.
You know,
You truly never know just where you'll end up. Take me, for instance. I had never lived outside my hometown until I left for college, and look at me now. All of a sudden, I'm in California of all places, cavorting about with a charming new friend. His brown eyes met yours briefly. Isn't that delightful? Life is nothing if not full of unexpected developments. I'd like to think we're doing what we can to make the most of that. I didn't have to be here, and you could have pretended no one knew had appeared in your small town and gone on as usual. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next.
glad to hear it.
I'm glad to hear it. I feel the same about finding out where things go from here and now. Besides, we've only been talking about work and school and such. There's much more to life than that. The world would be altogether too dull otherwise. You might not remember me mentioning it when we first met, but my most fulfilling hobby is ballroom dancing. It's a true passion of mine. You seem to remember him saying something along those lines. It's important to have genuine hobbies, don't you think? Speaking of hobbies, I listen to music. Baxter inclined his head, attentive to your words.
I see.
That's interesting. I had no idea. We actually have that in common. Fate smiles on us again. We should talk more about it sometimes, if you'd like. That'd be nice. It's something I really enjoy. It doesn't have to make me money. I feel the same way about ballroom dancing. It's something that has intrinsic value to me beyond the potential to earn a living of it. Although, to be clear, it isn't entirely devoid of, shall we say, remunerative benefits. His tone took on a slight edge, and his eyes brightened with an amusement. For those with a certain level of skill, there's some money to be had in the competitive scene, prize winnings as such. Hey there, I thought we weren't talking about money. I've been tricked. Baxter laughed heartily, his face
I
apologetic.
apologize.
I'm sorry to have deceived you, but I wasn't lying when I described it as a true passion of mine. Any additional compensation is nothing more than a fringe benefit. That's okay. I forgive you. I'm most grateful, and thank you for indulging me on the topic. I had fun. And then you were struck by the most obvious idea in the world. You were on Shopping Street, window shopping with a tourist. Baxter needed to get a souvenir for his stay in Sunset Bird. Baxter, you should pick something out. This is the best place to get a souvenir.
Gladly.
Excellent idea. I should find something nice here. He returned to his exploration of assorted shops. Now, with a renewed sense of purpose, the big picture had been replaced by every small detail. He lent support, pointing out hidden gems and offering the local opinion. He was unsure of what truly spoke of Sunset Bird. But after some back and forth, a change of heart, and then your advice, Baxter finally chose a cute bird figure carved from driftwood. The statue was pale and smooth. It fit in the palm of his hand, a perfect size to take with you. The wood was at first advertised as being from the very beach you were across from right at the moment. He was quite literally taking a piece of Sunset Bird with him. Baxter loved it, and you agreed that he'd made a good choice. You walked away from the shop side by side with the successful purchase swinging between you. When Baxter was gone, he'd only have to look at the driftwood statue to recall his day's stare. Your gaze wandered back to the man beside you, who you still hardly knew, the one you had so little time to know. Hey, where are you from? Baxter put his hands casually in his pockets, his gaze wandering out over the crowds and the ocean and off into the distance. Well, in the most immediate sense, I suppose you could say I came from Virginia. That's where my college is located, after all. But of course, I know that is not entirely what you meant. I'm merely teasing. While I might be studying in Virginia, I'm actually from the proverbial Oregon Trail, born and bred. That's the state where my home is, if you can believe it. Oh, Oregon. That's not far away at all. Virginia, though, not so much. You grew up pretty close by then. We're practically neighbors.
Oh?
That's true, isn't it? While I might not be as close a neighbor as your friend Cove when it comes to states, I grew up right next door. Lucky for me then. The thought of this seemed to please him greatly. You got the impression that Baxter had a soft spot for these kinds of coincidences. You found this fact about him really charming. Rather, speaking of which, it's actually a little funny. The land of my family home was built on, I suppose you could call it somewhat remote. It's a fair-sized estate, situated a little ways off from the rest of the town, so until I moved into college dorms, I'd go as far as to say that I'd never had neighbors before. His demeanor became more thoughtful at this. As for you, the admission came as something of a surprise. In the time you had known Baxter, which was admittedly not very long, this was the closest time he'd come to being melancholy. And even then, it was the faintest of glimpse. You blinked, and it was gone, a slate wiped clean. Another thought caught his fancy, and soon the characteristic grin was back on his face.
Not bad.
In any case, now we are neighbors in the truest sense of the word, at least until my time in Sunset Bird reaches its end. It was a nice thought, in spite of the certain knowledge that it would all be soon over. The two of you shared a look which could best be described as neighborly. How do you like it back in Virginia? I'd say I enjoy being there, for the most part. As you can probably imagine, it's quite different from here or back home in Oregon, especially the humidity. Everything seems smaller there too. In California, it's like the sky goes on forever, and the mountains and the horizons are impossibly far away. Oregon, as well, there's a scale there to the scenery that just doesn't compare. Whereas in Virginia, the hills are just that, hills rather than mountains, quaint little things, really, and they sort of gently enfold everything. His gaze grew distant again as his mind conjured up memories of the landscape, like he was getting lost among all those quaint little hills. Another good thing about it is the trees. Virginia has plenty of forest cover, like Oregon, so at least in the sense I'm among the familiar. That tracks. I think I read somewhere that something like 2/3 of Virginia consists of forests, right? 2/3? I can readily believe it. You are well informed, Stella. His voice took on a hushed, affectionate quality. I must confess, I have a soft spot for trees. There are these beautiful eastern white pine planted all over the college dorms, magnificent all year round. When summer comes to a close, the needles get everywhere. They fall so thick in places that the ground around is covered in what looks like one big tan shag carpet. If you were to walk underneath any of the branches, you'd be picking needles out of your hair until Christmas. You smiled at the mental image. Doesn't that make it kinda hard to maintain your whole black and white aesthetic? It's true, the natural tones do tend to clash. I have brown eyes, at least, which means I can make it work if it comes down to it. But you'd rather have not. But you'd rather not have to, right? A bemused grin.
You're incredible.
It's remarkable. You know me so well already. Something about the way he said that made your stomach go a little funny. Baxter inhaled slowly, almost dreamy. Ah, that's another good thing Virginia and Oregon have in common. With all those trees around and the variable climate, you truly get the experience of seasons changing. Summer to fall is especially beautiful, colors like you would not believe. He was about to get lost in thought again, but then caught himself. So, to finally answer your question, yes, I'd say that I like it in Virginia a fair amount. The humidity is still a bit of an sticking point. His narrow-eyed brows. He narrowed his eyes a fraction as the pun rolled off his tongue without his fully intending it. But at the very least, that's only an issue during the summer months, and happily for me, I've spent my summer elsewhere this year. You smiled a private smile to yourself. Yes, happily for Baxter indeed. What's your hometown like? I don't know if I got around to asking where Oregon you're from specifically. Right. I suppose I hadn't named the place yet. It's a little town called Golden Grove. You likely wouldn't have heard about it. You likely wouldn't have heard of it. Sure enough, you couldn't say you knew anything about the place, but the name kind of rang a bell though. With a name like that, it sounds like you must have a lot of forests over there. Baxter smiled with all of his teeth.
Of course.
Of course, there's only one thing that springs to mind, isn't there? It's built on the slope of a mountain and surrounded on all sides by woodland. In the fall, the whole area shines with a golden and orange patina of leaves. You almost forget any other color exists. No wonder they call it something so literal. It does make the place sound grander than it is, though, in truth, it's a small town, though not quite as tiny as Sunset Bird. You can easily stroll the length of this area. In Golden Grove, you'd at least want a bike or similar to make the trip, though some locals do take the walk. It's a quiet, sleepy corner of Oregon where hardly anyone comes or goes. You either move to the area to settle down, or you'd live there all your life to begin with. My ancestors fell into the former category, myself the latter. You've left now, though. I have indeed. I guess I bucked the trend in more ways than one. That certainly made sense. Ever since you'd first met Baxter, he'd seemed like the kind of guy to always be making waves of some kind or other. Something about the way he said that made you think he meant something else by it, though. Did you feel out of place then? Out there? Baxter shrugged casually. I think I did, sometimes, but that's not quite what I meant. He hummed thoughtfully and tapped his chin with a forefinger, trying to find precisely the right words. After a moment's pause, he continued, You have to understand that this is a small rural town. A fair number of residents are working class. There are some more affluent areas, but
To be honest,
I suppose you could say that my family has a reputation in those parts as the local people of means. Or perhaps, to put it in more vulgar terms, you're rich. He snapped his fingers. Precisely, and for better or worse, everyone knows it. If you were to go there and pass my name around, anyone would know who you were talking about. He gave you a meaningful look as he said this. Please don't actually do that. It might embarrass me. It might embarrass even me. You got the sneaking suspicion that it wasn't really his own bluster he was concerned about. He waved a hand with a great indifference, as if to lazily swat his own words out of the air. You figured that this was all he felt like saying on the subject. If I'm ever in town, I promise I won't throw your acclaimed name around.
very well.
Thank you. You needn't go out on your own on my account. Although if you are ever in the area, his smile took on an air of foolish amusement. I'm not planning on being in Golden Grove anytime soon, but all the same, I get the feeling it might be longer before I meet you there, one way or another, can say. With that, his voice trailed off, and his gaze drifted to the middle distance in contemplation. Is it hard living away from where you grew up? Do you miss it? Baxter nodded, not in agreement, but as if he'd been anticipating your question, he answered almost before you finished speaking.
No.
No. It was said so instantaneously, and with such genuine smile that you were rather taken aback. You weren't expecting such a candid answer as that. It's like he didn't even have to think about it. Seeing your momentary look of surprise, Baxter's expression softened to something more demure. Maybe he'd had this reaction before, maybe many times. It's not so bad as it sounds. At a minimum, I can honestly say that I wish I miss it, if that makes sense. You guessed you could understand that? I don't know how you feel about your hometown particularly, but you should at least be able to appreciate that I spent all my youth there. I'm not so jaded as to totally discount the place, far from it. But anything I like about my home wasn't exactly exclusive to this local. The US is a big country, and there are plenty of beautiful things to see wherever you go. I've experienced enough to know that much, at least. His voice took on a tone of polite finality, not harsh, simple matter of fact. So no, I don't miss it, and I won't be going back. If my parents wish to see me, they'll have to be the one visiting where I am. He snorted gently to himself. The idea amused him greatly. You got the feeling that he was enjoying the private joke at his family's expense. That could be one of the things you'd ask about later if he was willing to divulge. In any case, you could definitely relate to wanting to get away from it all and spread your wings somewhere out new. Perhaps you were kindred spirits in that regard. Having asked all the questions about Baxter's home you could think of, a final thought occurred to you.